My name is Elena Blackwood, 28 years old, and the invisible daughter of the Blackwood Entertainment empire. Sitting in the green room backstage at Madison Square Garden, watching my father glad hand executives and whisper excitedly to my mother, I felt a familiar knot tighten in my stomach. Tonight was supposed to be my brother's triumph, his breakthrough moment as the next Blackwood superstar. But beneath my simple black jeans and vintage band t-shirt beat the heart of someone they had all catastrophically underestimated. The bombshell I was about to drop on live television would shatter our family's perfect image forever, but not in the way they expected. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, stick around and hit that notification bell, because this is the story of how I turned my family's rejection into the sweetest revenge that changed the music industry forever. I grew up in Nashville's Belmead, in a sprawling mansion that looked like it belonged on the cover of Architectural Digest. 8 bedrooms, a recording studio, and grounds that required a full landscaping crew. From the outside, we were America's music royalty. My grandfather, Johnny Blackwood, had started Blackwood Records in 1962 with nothing but a beat-up guitar and dreams of making it in country music. When his performing career stalled, he pivoted to discovering talent, building the label from a one-room office to a Nashville institution. My father, Marcus Blackwood, inherited the company in 1985 and transformed it into a multimedia entertainment conglomerate. Under his leadership, Blackwood Entertainment grew from a $5 million country label to a $200 million empire encompassing music, television production, and artist management. We had offices in Nashville, Los Angeles, and New York, with a roster of Grammy winners and platinum-selling artists who regularly topped the charts. Every family gathering, every holiday dinner, every backyard barbecue inevitably became a celebration of the Blackwood legacy. Dad never tired of reminding everyone that 3 generations of Blackwoods had shaped American music, and he sure as hell wasn't going to let that tradition end with his children. There were 3 of us Blackwood kids. My older brother, Chase, 32, was the golden child despite possessing mediocre vocal talent and 0 songwriting ability. He had that classic Nashville look, tall, blue eyes, dimpled smile, and Dad was convinced that image would translate to stardom. Chase spent more time at honky-tonk bars picking up aspiring singers than actually working on his craft, but somehow Dad remained convinced he was the natural heir to carry on the family's artistic legacy. Then there was me, Elena, perpetually stuck in the middle at 28. Unlike my siblings, I had inherited Granddad's genuine musical gifts. I'd been writing songs since I was 8, taught myself piano, guitar, and violin by 12, and had perfect pitch that could detect when studio musicians were even slightly off-key. I studied music theory and business at Berklee College of Music, graduated summa cum laude, and had innovative ideas for breaking new artists in the digital age. Yet somehow Dad always looked right through me during A&R meetings as if my opinions were background noise. My younger sister, Madison, 25, completed our trio. She leveraged our family connections to become a social media influencer with millions of followers who loved her perfectly curated glimpses into Nashville elite living. She had 0 musical talent and couldn't carry a tune if her life depended on it, but never missed an opportunity to post about being a Blackwood legacy while contributing absolutely nothing to the family business. Mom, Catherine, came from old Nashville money. Her family had owned half of Music Row before selling to developers. She approached family conflict the way all proper Southern wives did, by smiling sweetly and changing the subject. She played peacekeeper, but ultimately enabled Dad's worst behaviors, especially his complete dismissal of my musical abilities. Marcus, honey, maybe you should listen to Elena's demo, she would occasionally suggest over Sunday dinner, only to immediately back down when Dad shot her that look. Catherine, please. This is the music business we're discussing, he would say before turning back to Chase to continue their conversation about which producers to work with or what image consultants to hire. Family gatherings always centered around industry talk that somehow excluded me. Dad and Chase would dominate conversations with name-dropping and inside gossip while I sat silently, despite understanding the creative and business sides better than either of them. If I tried to contribute, Dad would smile condescendingly and say something like, "That's sweet, Elena," but leave the music discussions to people who understand what sells. The breaking point came when I was 23, fresh out of Berkeley with honors. I had written and produced a complete album of original songs that blended traditional country storytelling with contemporary pop sensibilities, exactly the kind of crossover sound that was dominating the charts. I spent months crafting the perfect demo, hiring session musicians with my own money, and preparing a comprehensive marketing strategy for the new digital landscape. Dad finally agreed to listen during a label meeting, supposedly as a professional courtesy. I still remember walking into that wood-paneled conference room, guitar case and demo CDs in hand, heart pounding with nervousness and excitement. The A&R team, all men in their 40s and 50s who'd been Dad's drinking buddies for decades, watched with politely bored expressions as I set up my equipment. 3 songs into my performance, Dad checked his phone, sighed audibly, and held up his hand to stop me mid-verse. "I think we've heard enough," he said with that tight smile that never reached his eyes. "Elena, sweetheart, this is all very artistic, but completely wrong for today's country market. Our listeners want authenticity, not experimental pop country fusion." He turned to the A&R team with an apologetic shrug. "My daughter just graduated college and is full of these academic ideas. Now, shall we get back to real business?" The humiliation burned through me as I packed up my guitar while they chuckled and moved on as if I'd never been there. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I would leave Nashville and the family business behind. I would build my own career, something so successful that even my father couldn't dismiss it. I moved to Los Angeles with $3,000 in savings and my grandmother's vintage guitar. My parents assumed it was just a phase, a tantrum they could wait out. "She'll be back when she realizes how tough the real music business is," I overheard Dad telling Mom during one of our increasingly rare phone calls. Those early years were brutal. My tiny apartment in Hollywood cost nearly my entire monthly budget. I survived on cheap takeout and coffee, working multiple jobs: session musician, backup singer, music teacher, while writing songs in every spare moment. I performed at open mic nights in dive bars, buskied on street corners, and slowly built a network of musicians who believed in my vision. I created Phoenix Rising Music under the artist name Lee Phoenix. The initials stood for Luna Elena, my middle name that I'd always loved, but nobody knew that. I wanted my success or failure to be completely disconnected from the Blackwood name. I started small, writing songs for other artists, producing demos in my bedroom-turned studio. By year 4, I had placed 3 songs on the Billboard Hot 100 and was making enough to rent a proper studio space in West Hollywood. The breakthrough came when I wrote and produced Midnight Highway, a song that perfectly captured the loneliness of modern life wrapped in an irresistible melody. When it went platinum, major labels came calling, but I maintained my independence, determined to control my artistic destiny. Over the next 5 years, I strategically built Phoenix Rising into a boutique label with carefully curated artists who shared my vision of emotional authenticity combined with commercial appeal. We had modest chart success, but critical acclaim, earning respect in an industry that valued both artistic integrity and business acumen. Throughout it all, I maintained my pseudonym in all professional dealings. In the music industry, Lee Phoenix was known as a brilliant, reclusive songwriter-producer who rarely gave interviews or appeared at award shows. When I absolutely had to make public appearances, I used subtle changes to my appearance, different hair color, makeup style, clothing aesthetic, and let my artists do most of the talking. My family remained completely unaware of my success. During holiday calls and occasional visits, I kept conversations vague, describing my work as still grinding it out or making some progress. Dad never pressed for details, having already written off my career as a California pipe dream. This suited me perfectly as I built Phoenix Rising into something that would eventually shock them all. What they didn't know was that for the past 2 years, I had been strategically building relationships with Blackwood Entertainment's biggest artists. I studied their contracts, identified their frustrations with the label's old-school approach, and positioned Phoenix Rising as a modern alternative that actually understood the digital music landscape. 6 months ago, I had my business manager send an anonymous partnership proposal through a third party. Phoenix Rising would handle digital strategy and artist development for Blackwood's roster in exchange for distribution rights and creative control. Dad predictably rejected it without proper consideration, dismissing it as some West Coast nonsense. The week before Chase's Madison Square Garden debut, I was in my corner office overlooking the Hollywood Hills, finalizing the paperwork for what would be the most important deal of my life. My assistant knocked and entered with my travel itinerary. "Your flight to New York is confirmed for Thursday at 2 p.m., she said, placing the folder on my desk. "Are you sure you don't want to bring your A&R team for the showcase?" I shook my head. "This is personal. I need to handle it alone." After she left, my phone rang. It was Maya, my best friend since those early struggling days when we'd shared stages at open mic nights across LA. "Are you really going through with this family reunion charade?" she asked without preamble. "After everything they did? After years of barely acknowledging your existence?" I sighed, spinning in my chair to face the window. "I have to be there in person when it happens, Maya. I need to see his face." "I remember the last Christmas disaster," she said carefully. "Your dad announced Chase's record deal while you sat there with your Grammy nomination that nobody even mentioned. You came back to LA and didn't speak to them for 6 months. The memory stung. Dad had raised a toast to the future of Blackwood Entertainment while looking directly at my brother, who had contributed absolutely nothing to the creative process of his upcoming album. Meanwhile, my song, Broken Wings, credited only to Ellie Phoenix, was nominated for Best Country Song, and nobody in my family had any idea. This time will be different, I promised. Everything changes tonight. I spent the evening packing, deliberately choosing my wardrobe to make a statement. Gone were the casual clothes my family associated with me. Instead, I packed designer jeans, vintage band t-shirts that only industry insiders would recognize as collectible, and subtle signifiers of success that only the music elite would understand, a vintage Stratocaster. Custom-made cowboy boots from a legendary Nashville craftsman, a jacket that had belonged to a country music icon. None of it ostentatious, all of it unmistakably expensive to those who knew what to look for. After years of deliberately downplaying my success around my family, I wanted them to see glimpses of it before the final revelation. Madison Square Garden buzzed with industry energy as I arrived for Chase's showcase. The venue that had hosted legends, where careers were made and broken, where tonight my brother would either triumph or fail spectacularly. I showed my family VIP credentials to security and made my way backstage, past the controlled chaos of sound checks and nervous energy. The Blackwood family had commandeered a private green room, complete with catering and an open bar. Mom was fluttering around in her designer dress, playing the perfect music industry wife. Dad worked the room with the easy confidence of someone who'd been doing this for decades, glad-handing executives and whispering excitedly about the next generation of Blackwood talent. "Elena!" Mom spotted me first, rushing over with arms extended. "Oh, honey, you look different. Is that a real leather jacket?" "Vintage," I confirmed, returning her hug. "1980s term merch. Hard to find." She pulled back, studying my appearance with the eye of someone who'd spent decades around industry professionals. "You look successful." Before I could respond, Dad materialized beside us, his showman's smile in full effect. "Elena, you made it to the big show." He clapped me on the shoulder with performative enthusiasm. "Your brother's about to make history tonight." "So I hear," I replied evenly. "How's the label doing, Dad?" "I've been hearing interesting industry talk in LA." His smile flickered for just a moment. "Nothing we can't handle. The music business is always changing, but Blackwood Entertainment adapts. That's what we do." Madison appeared from wherever she'd been creating social media content, phone already recording. "Elena's here, everyone. Family support for Chase's big night." She air-kissed my cheeks while ensuring her followers got the perfect angle. "You should post more about your music stuff," she said, still recording. "Your followers would love to see behind-the-scenes industry content." "I prefer to keep work and social media separate," I replied, stepping out of her camera frame. "Elena's always been private about her little projects, Dad interjected with that familiar, dismissive tone. Not everyone's built for the spotlight like Chase. The casual dismissal rolled off me like water now. I'd heard variations of it for so long that it had lost all power to hurt me. If anything, it strengthened my resolve for what was coming. Chase finally joined us, resplendent in his stage outfit, designer jeans, custom boots, and a shirt that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. He looked every inch the Nashville star, which had always been more important to Dad than actual talent. Little sis. He pulled me into a hug that smelled like expensive cologne and nervous sweat. Thanks for flying out for this. I know you're busy with your music teaching or whatever. Wouldn't miss it, I said, surprised to find I meant it. Whatever happened tonight, this was my family, complicated and dismissive as they were. The showcase began at 8 p.m. sharp. Madison Square Garden's intimate theater setup held about 3,000 people, industry executives, music journalists, radio programmers, and fans who'd won tickets through various promotions. This wasn't just a concert, it was Chase's audition for stardom, broadcast live on a major music network. We watched from the VIP section as Chase took the stage to polite applause. He looked confident, worked the crowd with practiced charm, and launched into his opening number, a mid-tempo country rock anthem that his team of writers had crafted specifically for broad commercial appeal. 3 songs in, I had to admit that Chase had improved. His vocals were stronger, his stage presence more commanding. The crowd was responding positively, and I found myself genuinely hoping he would succeed. Whatever our family dynamics, I didn't want to see him fail on national television. But then came the 4th song, and everything changed. I want to do something special tonight, Chase announced to the crowd. This next song is very personal to me. I wrote it during a difficult time in my life, and it represents everything I want to say as an artist. He settled onto a stool with his acoustic guitar and began playing the opening chords of Midnight Highway. My Midnight Highway. The song I had written during my darkest period in LA, when I was questioning everything about my career and my family. The song that had gone platinum under Ellie Phoenix's name. The song that had established my reputation as a songwriter who could tap into universal emotions while maintaining commercial appeal. I sat frozen as my brother performed my most personal work to 3,000 people and a live television audience, claiming it as his own creation. Dad was beaming beside me, leaning over to whisper, "This is it. This is the song that's going to make him a star." The performance was actually good. Chase had always been better at interpretation than creation, but hearing my own words, my own melody, presented as his breakthrough moment was devastating in ways I hadn't anticipated. When he finished to thunderous applause, Chase stood and addressed the audience with tears in his eyes. That song came from a place of real pain, real struggle. It's about feeling lost and finding your way home. I hope it speaks to anyone who's ever felt invisible, ever felt like giving up. The irony was so profound it actually made me dizzy. During the intermission, I excused myself to the bathroom, needing a moment alone to process what had just happened. How had Chase gotten my song? How had he convinced himself, or been convinced, that he had written it? My phone buzzed with a text from Maya, who was watching the live stream. "Holy shit, is he performing your song? How is that even possible?" I splashed cold water on my face and stared at my reflection in the mirror. 7 years of building my career, of proving myself outside the Blackwood name, and my own brother was claiming my work as his breakthrough moment. When I returned to the VIP section, the second half of the show was beginning. Chase performed 5 more songs, a mix of covers and originals that showcased his range and stage presence. The crowd loved him. The industry people were taking notes, and by all measures, the showcase was a success. As Chase took his final bow to a standing ovation, Dad grabbed my arm. "Did you hear that song? Midnight Highway? Pure genius. The boy's got the gift, Elena. He's going to be bigger than anything our family has ever produced." I looked at my father's proud face, at my mother's tearful smile, at Madison filming Chase's triumph for her social media empire. My family was celebrating my brother's appropriation of my work as the greatest moment in Blackwood Entertainment history. That's when I made the decision that would change everything. "Dad," I said quietly, my voice somehow cutting through the celebratory noise around us. "We need to talk. All of us." Something in my tone must have gotten through because he turned to face me fully, his expression shifting from celebration to confusion. "What is it, Elena? Can't it wait?" "This is Chase's moment." "No," I said firmly. "It can't wait." "Because that song he just performed?" "I wrote it." The words hung in the air between us, creating a bubble of shocked silence in the middle of the backstage celebration. "What did you say?" Mom asked, leaning closer as if she'd misheard. "Midnight Highway," I repeated clearly. "I wrote it 3 years ago. It went platinum under my professional name, Ellie Phoenix. Chase just performed my song and claimed it as his own on live television." Dad's face went through a rapid succession of emotions: confusion, disbelief, anger, and something that looked almost like fear. "That's impossible," he sputtered. "Chase wrote that song months ago. I heard the early demos." I pulled out my phone and opened the music streaming app, navigating to Ellie Phoenix's profile. "Here's the original recording," I said, hitting play. "Released 2 years before Chase claims to have written it. Note the copyright information." As my recorded voice filled the backstage area, performing the exact same song Chase had just presented as his breakthrough moment, the celebration around us gradually died into uncomfortable silence. Madison lowered her phone for the first time all evening. "Wait, Elena. You're Ellie Phoenix." I nodded, looking directly at my father. "Luna Elena Phoenix. I've been recording and producing under that name for 7 years. Phoenix Rising Music is my label. I've placed 12 songs on the Billboard Hot 100, won 2 Grammy nominations, and produced 3 platinum albums." The color drained from Dad's face as he processed the implications. But Ellie Phoenix is. We tried to sign Ellie Phoenix last year. Our A&R department said they were unreachable. Because I told my management team to reject all offers from Blackwood Entertainment, I confirmed. I wanted nothing to do with a label that had dismissed my work so completely. Chase appeared at that moment, still glowing from his performance high, expecting congratulations and celebration. Instead, he found his family huddled in tense conversation around a phone playing familiar music. "What's going on?" he asked, his smile faltering as he registered the atmosphere. "Chase," I said, turning to face him directly. "Where did you get Midnight Highway?" His confusion seemed genuine. What do you mean?" "I wrote it." "No," I said firmly. "I wrote it. It's been available on streaming platforms for 2 years under Ellie Phoenix's name. How did you come to believe it was your song?" The silence stretched uncomfortably as Chase's expression shifted from confusion to dawning realization to something approaching panic. Dad gave it to me," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "He said it came through normal channels, from a songwriter looking to place material." All eyes turned to Dad, who looked like he'd aged a decade in the past 5 minutes. "Marcus," Mom said quietly, "what is he talking about?" Dad's shoulders sagged as the weight of his deception became clear. "The label bought the rights to several Ellie Phoenix songs last year through a third-party publisher." "I didn't know." "I had no idea Ellie Phoenix was Elena." "But you did know the song wasn't Chase's original work," I pressed. "You let him claim it as his own composition on live television." I thought. Dad's voice trailed off as he realized how damning his actions looked. The songs needed an artist. Chase needed material. It seemed like good business. The casual way he discussed my creative work as a commodity to be reassigned sent a fresh wave of anger through me. "Good business," I repeated, my voice rising slightly. "You took my song, my most personal work, and gave it to Chase to perform as his own breakthrough moment?" Madison, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly gasped. "Oh my God, Elena. Phoenix Rising Music, you're the label that's been signing all our artists." I nodded grimly. Sierra Williams, Jake Morrison, the Harmony Collective, they all came to Phoenix Rising because Blackwood Entertainment wasn't meeting their creative or business needs in the digital age. Dad's expression shifted from defensive to alarmed. "You've been poaching our artists?" "I've been offering them better contracts, creative control, and a management team that understands how music actually works in 2024, I corrected. "They came to me because your label is stuck in 1995. The full scope of what I'd built began to dawn on him. How long have you been planning this? I wasn't planning anything, I said honestly. I was building my own career, my own success, completely separate from this family. But when you started stealing my work and giving it to Chase, that changed things. Chase slumped against the wall, the reality of his situation finally sinking in. My whole album, how many of the songs? 3 others, I confirmed. Songs I wrote, that Blackwood Entertainment bought through intermediaries, that you've been performing as your original compositions. Mom spoke for the first time since my revelation, her voice steady despite the chaos around us. Elena, you've been Grammy-nominated? I nodded. Twice. Best Country Song and Producer of the Year. And we didn't know, she said quietly. Your own family didn't know. The hurt in her voice was genuine, and for the first time that evening, I felt a pang of regret. Not for building my career independently, but for how completely I'd shut them out of it. I didn't think you'd care, I said honestly. Dad made it clear that my music wasn't commercial enough, wasn't right for the Blackwood brand. So I built something else. Dad found his voice again, though it lacked his usual commanding authority. What do you want, Elena? What's this really about? I looked around at my family, my father, whose business empire was crumbling around him, my mother, whose comfortable world was shifting beneath her feet, Chase, whose moment of triumph had become a humiliation, Madison, whose perfect social media narrative had exploded in real time. What I want, I said quietly, is for this family to finally see who I really am, what I've accomplished, what I'm capable of. I pulled a folder from my purse, documents I'd been carrying as insurance, but now realized I was ready to use. Phoenix Rising Music is prepared to make an offer to acquire Blackwood Entertainment, I announced, the words falling like bombs in the small space. We're offering $75 million for the label, the catalog, and all associated assets. The silence that followed was absolute. You want to buy our company, Dad said slowly, as if testing the words. I want to save it, I corrected. Blackwood Entertainment has lost 40% of its market value in the past 3 years. You're hemorrhaging artists, your streaming revenue is down, and your development pipeline is empty. But the catalog has value, and the name still means something in Nashville. Chase found his voice first. So what happens to me? To my career? I looked at my brother, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time. Not as the golden child who'd stolen my place, but as someone who'd been set up to fail by a father who valued image over substance. That depends, I said honestly. Do you want to be an artist, or do you want to be a Blackwood Entertainment product? Because there's a difference. He stared at me for a long moment, processing the implications. I can actually sing, he said quietly. I mean, I'm not a songwriter like you, but I can perform. I can connect with audiences. I nodded, recognizing the truth in that. Then we work with what you have. You become an interpreter of great songs instead of pretending to write them. There's no shame in that. Some of the biggest stars in music history were interpreters, not writers. Dad stepped forward, his business instincts kicking in despite the personal chaos. $75 million for a company that was valued at $200 million 5 years ago. A company that's worth maybe $40 million in today's market, I countered. I'm offering significantly above fair value because of the family connection and because I believe the Blackwood name, properly managed, can be rebuilt. Madison, who had been processing everything in silence, suddenly spoke up. So you'd be our boss? Like, literally our boss. I almost smiled at the parallel to my own thoughts. I'd be the CEO of a restructured company. What that means for each of you depends on what you want to contribute. Mom set down her wine glass, and I noticed her hands were steady despite everything that had just happened. Elena, she said clearly, I owe you an apology. We all do, but especially me, because I knew you were special and I didn't fight for you when I should have. The simple acknowledgement pierced something in my chest that I'd thought was permanently hardened. You were trying to keep the peace, I said, surprised by the gentleness in my own voice. I understand that. No, she said firmly. I was taking the easy path. You needed an advocate, and I failed you as a mother. Dad looked between us, perhaps realizing that his wife's simple honesty was worth more than all his defensive bluster. "What are your terms?" he asked finally, the question of a businessman who knew he was beaten. I opened the folder, revealing documents that had been prepared for months, but never quite used. Phoenix Rising acquires all assets and assumes operational control. The Blackwood name remains on the company, but decision-making authority transfers to me and my team. Existing contracts are honored through their terms, but all new signings and creative decisions go through my A&R department. I looked at each family member as I continued. "Dad, you're offered the position of Chairman Emeritus, an advisory role with full benefits, but no operational authority. Chase, you can remain as an artist on the roster, but with honest representation of your role as a performer, not a songwriter. Madison, your social media skills are actually valuable if properly directed. You could head our digital marketing division." The terms were more generous than any of them had a right to expect, and I could see they knew it. "And Mom," she asked quietly. "You run the Blackwood Foundation," I said, surprising myself with the decision. "We establish a charitable arm focused on music education, particularly for young women trying to break into the industry." She nodded, tears in her eyes. "I'd like that." The showcase aftermath continued around us, but we stood in our bubble of transformed family dynamics. Dad looked older than his 65 years, but also somehow lighter, as if a weight he'd been carrying had been lifted. "I need to ask," he said quietly. "The song tonight, will there be legal consequences for Chase?" I shook my head. "Phoenix Rising owns the rights through the original purchase. Chase performed it in good faith, believing it was legitimately his. But going forward, all attribution needs to be accurate." Chase nodded gratefully. "Elena, I'm sorry. I really thought I'd written it. When Dad gave it to me, I was so excited to finally have something that felt real, something that connected." "I know," I said, and I meant it. "Dad put you in an impossible position by not telling you the truth about the song's origins." The conversation was interrupted by a knock on the green room door. A production assistant peeked in nervously. "Excuse me, Mr. Blackwood? The network wants to do a quick family interview about Chase's performance. Are you ready?" We all looked at each other, realizing that we were about to face the world as a fundamentally different family than we'd been 2 hours ago. "Give us 5 minutes," I said to the assistant, who nodded and disappeared. "What do we say?" Madison asked, her influencer instincts kicking in. "I mean, my followers are going to have questions about everything that just happened." "We tell the truth," I said simply. "That the Blackwood family is entering a new chapter, that we're combining our legacies to build something stronger together." Dad nodded slowly. "And about tonight's performance?" "Chase performed beautifully," I said, meeting my brother's eyes. "The songs connected with the audience, which is what matters most. Going forward, we'll be more accurate about songwriting credits." As we prepared to face the cameras, I felt a strange sense of completion. 7 years ago, I'd left Nashville believing that success would be enough, that proving myself would fill the hollow space where family approval should have been. I'd been wrong about that, but right about everything else. The interview went smoothly, all things considered. Chase talked about his performance, his gratitude for family support, and his excitement about working with Phoenix Rising Music going forward. Dad spoke about the evolution of the music industry and the importance of adapting to new realities. Mom mentioned her excitement about the foundation. I talked about the power of family, the importance of supporting young artists, and the bright future of the newly restructured Blackwood Entertainment. Madison live-streamed parts of it, providing her followers with just enough behind-the-scenes content to satisfy their curiosity without revealing the full drama of our family reckoning. 6 months later, I stood in the renovated headquarters of Blackwood Phoenix Entertainment in Nashville's Music Row. The offices had been completely transformed, maintaining the historic charm while embracing modern functionality. Gold records lined the walls alongside innovative digital displays showing real-time streaming numbers and social media engagement. The merger had been more successful than even my optimistic projections had anticipated. We'd retained 90% of our existing artists, signed several major new acts, and our streaming revenue had increased by 200% under the new management structure. Dad had embraced his emeritus role with surprising grace. He spent his time mentoring young artists and maintaining relationships with industry veterans, providing institutional knowledge while staying out of day-to-day operations. Our weekly meetings had become genuinely collaborative sessions where his experience complemented my vision for the company's future. Chase's career had found its proper footing. His album, with accurate songwriting credits, had performed well commercially and earned critical respect. He discovered that being an interpreter of great songs rather than pretending to write them actually suited his talents better. More importantly, he seemed happier, no longer carrying the weight of expectations he could never meet. Madison had flourished in her new role, using her social media expertise to revolutionize how we connected artists with audiences. Her Behind the Music content series had become a benchmark for authentic industry storytelling, and her follower engagement had translated into real revenue growth for our artists. Mom's Foundation had already awarded its first round of scholarships to young women pursuing music careers, and she'd become a genuine advocate for industry change rather than just a decorative wife of a music executive. As for me, I was no longer Elena Blackwood trying to prove herself worthy, nor Ellie Phoenix hiding behind a pseudonym. I was simply Elena, running a company that honored both tradition and innovation, leading a family business that finally felt like a family. The most profound moment had come unexpectedly during a late-night session reviewing quarterly reports. Dad and I were alone in the conference room, surrounded by charts showing our dramatic turnaround, when he looked up from the numbers and said quietly, "You saved us, Elena." Not just the business, but the family. The simple acknowledgement had healed something in me that I hadn't realized was still broken. Not because I'd needed his validation to feel successful, but because it represented the human connection I'd always craved underneath all the professional achievement. The Grammy Awards red carpet stretched before me, cameras flashing as I adjusted my vintage Versace gown. This time, I wasn't hiding behind a pseudonym or watching from my couch in LA. Elena Blackwood was nominated for Producer of the Year, and my entire family was here to celebrate. "Elena, over here," photographers called as we posed together, Dad distinguished in his classic tuxedo, Mom radiant in emerald green, Chase looking genuinely happy in a perfectly tailored suit, and Madison documenting everything with the professional eye she developed as our head of digital marketing. We made our way into the Staples Center, past industry veterans who now knew my real name and respected what I'd built. The irony wasn't lost on me that many of the same executives who dismissed me years ago in Nashville were now eager to work with Blackwood Entertainment. Nervous? Chase asked as we took our seats in the producer section. I considered the question. Excited, I replied honestly. For the first time in my career, I get to be here as myself. The ceremony began with the usual spectacle of performances and acceptance speeches. When they announced the nominees for Producer of the Year, my heart rate spiked despite my outward calm. The other nominees were industry legends, people whose work I'd studied and admired for years. And the Grammy goes to. The presenter opened the envelope with practiced dramatic flair. Elena Blackwood. The roar of applause seemed distant as I stood, my family erupting in celebration around me. Dad was on his feet, clapping with genuine pride. Mom was crying, happy tears this time. Chase grabbed me in a bear hug, and even Madison put down her phone to embrace me properly. Walking to the stage felt surreal, each step echoing with the memory of every rejection, every dismissal, every moment I'd felt invisible in my own family. But also with every late night in my Hollywood studio, every risk I'd taken, every artist I'd believed in when others wouldn't. At the podium, holding the golden gramophone, I looked out at an audience that included the same Nashville establishment that had once written me off. 7 years ago, I began, my voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment. I was told that my music wasn't commercial enough, that I didn't understand the real world of the industry. I was advised to leave the music business to people who knew better. A murmur rippled through the audience as they sensed where this was heading. Tonight, I want to thank everyone who believed in my vision when I couldn't get anyone else to listen. But mostly, I want to thank my family, who taught me that sometimes you have to lose everything to find out who you really are. I found my family in the audience, Dad wiping his eyes, Mom beaming with pride. This award represents every young woman who's been told she's too much or not enough, who's been dismissed in boardrooms or overlooked at family dinners. Your voice matters. Your vision matters. And if they won't give you a seat at the table, build your own table. The standing ovation felt different from any applause I'd received before. Not just acknowledgement of my success, but recognition of the journey it had taken to get here. Backstage, reporters crowded around with questions about my dramatic family business story, which had become industry legend over the past year. "How did it feel to acquire your own family's company?" one journalist asked. "I didn't acquire it to get revenge," I replied carefully. "I acquired it to save something I loved." The Blackwood name represents 3 generations of music history. My job was to make sure it survived into the 4th generation. "And your relationship with your father now?" I smiled, thinking of our weekly meetings where he actually listened to my ideas. "Complicated, but honest. For the first time in my life, we're partners instead of adversaries." Later that evening, at the Grammy after-party, I found myself on the terrace overlooking Los Angeles, the city where I'd reinvented myself, where I'd learned that success without connection is hollow, where I discovered that the best revenge is living well enough to offer forgiveness. Chase joined me, loosening his bow tie. "Pretty crazy year, huh?" That's one way to put it. I handed him a glass of champagne from the passing waiter. "How are you handling everything?" "Really?" He was quiet for a moment, looking out at the city lights. "Honestly, it's been humbling, but also freeing. I spent so many years trying to be something I wasn't, trying to live up to Dad's expectations. Now I get to just be good at what I'm actually good at." "Which is considerable," I said, meaning it. "Your new album is your best work." Because it's honest, he agreed. Because I stopped pretending to be a songwriter and focused on being a storyteller. "Thanks for showing me the difference." Madison appeared beside us, having changed from her ceremony gown into a more party-appropriate dress, but still maintaining her professional documenting habits. "Okay, but seriously," she said, "this whole thing is going to make an amazing documentary. The family drama, the secret identity, the Grammy win. It's like something out of a movie." "Life isn't content, Megan," I reminded her gently. "Madison," she corrected automatically, then paused. "And you're right. But some stories are worth telling because they might help other people see possibilities they didn't know existed." I looked at my sister, really looked at her, and saw someone who'd grown beyond the superficial influencer persona into something more substantial. Her work with our digital marketing had shown a strategic mind I'd never given her credit for. "You might be right about that," I conceded. "Dad and Mom found us eventually, Dad carrying 2 glasses of his preferred scotch." "Mind if we join you?" Mom asked. "It's a bit overwhelming in there." We stood together in comfortable silence for a while, the Blackwood family finally occupying the same space without tension or performance. "You know," Dad said eventually, "your grandfather would have been proud tonight. Not just of the Grammy, but of how you handled everything. The business, the family, all of it. He would have been proud of all of us," I replied, "for figuring out how to be a family and a business without destroying each other." Speaking of which, Mom interjected, "I have news about the foundation. We've received applications from over 500 young women for this year's scholarships. The stories are incredible. Girls from small towns, from families that don't understand their dreams, from situations I recognize all too well." She looked at me meaningfully. "They remind me of someone I know." "We're going to help them," I said, the certainty surprising me with its intensity. "All of them we can." "Actually," Madison said, her business mind clearly working, "what if we created a mentorship program too? Connect scholarship recipients with industry professionals, give them the network and support system that so many of us lacked starting out." I nodded, impressed by the idea's potential. "That could work. Chase, you'd be good at mentoring performers, teaching them about stage presence, connecting with audiences." "I'd like that," he said, seeming to mean it. Dad raised his glass. "To second chances," he said. "And to the daughter who taught us that admitting you're wrong is the first step to getting things right." We clinked glasses as the LA skyline twinkled below us, the city that had been my refuge now serving as backdrop for our family's redemption. The Nashville Scenes cover story featured a photo of me in the renovated Blackwood Phoenix headquarters, Grammy prominently displayed behind my desk alongside family photos that now included genuine smiles. The headline read, "How Elena Blackwood Revolutionized Music Row and Her Family." 5 years after that explosive night at Madison Square Garden, Blackwood Phoenix Entertainment had become one of Nashville's most successful independent labels. We launched careers, broken barriers, and proven that family businesses could evolve without losing their soul. Chase had just completed his most successful tour yet, an acoustic storytelling show that played to his strengths as an interpreter and performer. His Instagram was full of grateful posts from fans who connected with his honest presentation of his artistic identity. Madison's digital marketing division had revolutionized how country artists built their brands, and her documentary about women in the music industry had won a Sundance Award. She'd kept her influencer platform, but transformed it into something with genuine substance. Mom's Foundation had awarded scholarships to over 2,000 young women and established the mentorship program that Madison had suggested. Seeing their success stories felt more fulfilling than any chart position I'd ever achieved. Dad had become the industry's most sought-after consultant for family business transitions, helping other entertainment dynasties navigate generational changes without imploding. His weekly advice column in Music Business Worldwide had become required reading. As for me, I was no longer the angry daughter seeking validation or the hidden phoenix building an empire in secret. I was Elena Blackwood, CEO, Grammy winner, and most importantly, a daughter who'd learned that true success isn't about proving your family wrong. It's about helping them see what's possible when everyone gets to be right. The phone on my desk rang, interrupting my reflection. My assistant's voice came through the intercom. "Elena, there's a young woman here to see you. Says she's a scholarship recipient who has a song she'd like you to hear." I smiled, remembering another young woman who'd once sat in a Nashville office, guitar case in hand, heart full of hope and talent that nobody seemed to want to acknowledge. "Send her in," I said, "and hold my calls for the next hour." Because sometimes the most important thing a successful person can do is make sure the next generation doesn't have to build their dreams in secret. The last song isn't always the one that plays at the end. Sometimes it's the one that finally gets heard. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, it's the one that opens the door for everyone who comes after you. 10 years later in Nashville, in the heart of the music industry on Music Row, I sat as the morning sun filtered through the large glass windows of Blackwood Phoenix Entertainment. The light reflecting on my desk illuminated my Grammy Award and photos with my family, this time filled with genuine smiles. There was a knock on my door and my assistant entered. "Elena, there's a young woman here to see you. She says she's one of the scholarship recipients and has a song she'd like you to hear." I smiled, remembering another young woman who once sat in a Nashville office, guitar case in hand, heart full of talent, and hope that nobody seemed to want to acknowledge. "Send her in," I said, "and hold my calls for the next hour." Because sometimes the most important thing a successful person can do is ensure the next generation doesn't have to build their dreams in secret. The door opened and a young woman entered, about 22 to 23 years old, a bit nervous but determined. She carried a guitar case and had that familiar sparkle in her eyes. "What did you think of this story? What emotions did Elena's journey evoke in you?" I think the story's strongest element was showing how family dynamics can transform and how someone can discover their own worth independent of their relationship with their family. Elena choosing healing over revenge was truly powerful. Which scene hit you the hardest? Was it that explosive reveal at Madison Square Garden or the Grammy speech? What do you think Elena could have done differently from the start? Should she have confronted her family earlier or completely cut ties? If you enjoyed this kind of family drama and personal growth story, don't forget to hit that like button. And how about subscribing for more emotional storytelling, character development analysis, and music industry drama content? What I'm curious about in the comments, if you were in Elena's position, what would you have said in that Grammy speech? Could you have been as generous to your family as she was?